Okay, so first of all, just to review the test itself. Okay, the first question in sport motors then was to make this procedure for insert supplier. Now the truth is this almost exactly follows our standard stored procedure. I gave you recipes in that PowerPoint slide on how to create these standard procedures, right, including getting the scope identity and returning that as an output variable. So those that had worked through that was a real advantage. You found this very easy. Plus, this was almost identical actually to the last question on homework exercise 2, which you had the solution for as well. So really, this is the question that most people did very well on, right? So I think probably because you had worked on similar examples in the past. But I'll maybe just share a couple other simple approaches that might prove useful to you as we go through it in addition. So first is create this USP insert supplier, right? So it's a stored procedure. I did a couple times have people creating functions where they needed a procedure and vice versa. Oh, I better refresh my databases. I almost forgot. So I'm just going to go in here, do my search and replace business because I have these scripts open. I'll replace username underscore with my username underscore. And notice that I don't think it's case sensitive, but just in case, I can select all open documents, right? That way I can get both of these in one go. So there we go, all 18 occurrences. That just means I can quickly run each one just to get a fresh copy without any objects getting in the way or data being removed or changed in any way. All right. So I'll make a new query here working in sport motors. Okay. By the way, my little trick there was I selected one of the windows that was already working in sport motors, and then by clicking new query, it assumes I want to keep working in that database. All right. So we're going to create a procedure. Remember, I can just say proc for procedure, and the name was specified in the instructions, right? So this is 1A. I guess I could maybe throw in a little bit of comments as well, right? So now, basically this procedure is going to do the insert of data into that table. So if we remind ourselves what these tables look like here, well, that's this one right over here, sports supplier. You can see there's quite a number of fields, right? So to type all those names out by hand is a little time consuming. And walking around the room, I did see a number of people doing just that, although some would drag the field names out of the Object Explorer as a bit of a time saver. But I did show in class once, and it was also shown in the videos, a nice and easy way to then get most of the insert up on the screen, and then you can just do a bit of search and replace magic to get parameters and so on as well. That little technique is utilizing the table itself. So if I come down here, find my D. Stilwell Sport Motors, go into the tables, all I have to do is come to the supplier table. If I click with the right mouse button or right click, script table as, here are the action queries as well. So I can say insert. So maybe I'll just put it into a new query window, right? And that gives me most of the text. Now it's not exactly perfect the way I need it yet, but it's pretty darn good. So I'm going to grab that, come over here. I know I need to make my various parameters there first of all, and then I'll have as, right, with a begin and an end. That's just your curly braces like in C# and JavaScript. And it's inside here I'll be doing the insert, right? So I'll take that much code for now. Now what I'm missing up here are my parameters at the top. So here's where I can grab all this. Actually, I can even cut it out of there because I'll come up with something else to put there. And paste it in here, right? And it has most of the information fairly well arranged for me. I just have to do some search and replace, right? So I'll select the text first, so I'm just working in this region. Less chance of messing something else up, right? If I replace all of those less than symbols, the little angle bracket there, with my @ symbol, then that just creates all those, turns them into parameter names, right? At the end of the line is a comma greater than symbol, right? So if I go comma greater than, replace with nothing. Make sure there's nothing there. I can just strip all those out. That gets rid of them. Now the only issue I really have is the comma in between the parameter name and the data type. Well, if I search for comma space, well, I want to make sure that's selected. I don't want to get rid of other comma spaces, and just replace that with the space alone without the comma. There we go. And now it's basically perfect, right? I have all my parameters there, and they have to specify their data types, and they match the ones inside the system. The only thing that would be good to do as well is have a look and see what is null and isn't null. I didn't take off any marks for people that didn't do that. But the ones that allow null, it's considered generally a good practice here. So supplier name is not null, but look, all the others allow null, right? So everything after supplier name that's in here, I could put equals null. And that would be a good practice. It's not essential. Right? Okay, now I'm not quite done though, because remember, following our template for these, we want to be able to ask back some information. Specifically, what's the new automatically generated value for the primary key? In this case, it's integer, or at least big int, identity, right? So you notice that it's fairly clever. When it wrote this for me, it doesn't even make mention in this code that was generated by the system of the primary key, because it's smart enough to realize it's an identity. Don't need it, right? Don't want it involved in the insert. But here I do, so I'll maybe, to be consistent, I'll put the comma at the beginning of the line. And I can just call it ID, but you know, maybe to be consistent with the other names, I'll call it supplier ID. And it is indeed a big int. But I'm going to mark it as output. I'm only putting the caps to make it stand out on the page. It doesn't matter that it's in caps or lowercase, right? So that'll be my output parameter then. So that wasn't there in the code that I got, but I know I'm going to need it. Now the insert, the trouble is what goes inside the brackets here? Well, basically it's all my parameters. But actually just working with the other section, I came to realize that what I could do is grab these, there, up to there, just inside the curly braces, copy that, paste it in here, right? And just inside this block of code, do two quick search and replaces, Control H, look for the left square bracket, replace it with the @ symbol, right? And then basically the right square brackets are just unneeded, so just replace them with nothingness. And there we go. So I have the parameters, the whole thing all done without virtually typing anything, right? That's much quicker and easier to do it that way, you know, than manually going through and typing it all. Now we aren't quite done though. Okay, we know from our we know from our recipes that there's a couple different ways we could write the code, but the last step that we want to do is, you know, get the new ID, the new identity value, right? And the way I suggested before is something like this, okay? So if we use, I can get rid of this window, make a little more room, right? Set my output parameter using that scope identity function that returns, okay, if it's done right after an insert happens, it returns the new identity value that was created. The only reason for throwing the where on the end is might as well do a logical check, right, a bit of a test here. If the insert failed for some reason, well, there's no point wasting time asking for the new identity value. There won't be one, right? So if row count is 1, then we know our insert worked and I have a new identity to get. And that basically ends, okay, the code for the actual procedure itself, right? So good practice would be to put a go And then we have to do our test script. Okay. For question 1, right? So this is really 1B, I guess. Okay. Now, all we really have to do is make up some values and call this an insert a record, right? But the other thing we want to do is we want to grab that output parameter. Okay, so I'll make a variable, declare a variable first, then I'll execute it, and then I can print some message to show what the value in the output parameter was, right? So I'll declare, I don't know, new ID, something like that, as a big int. There's my execute. So I just made up values. The only thing that was a little tricky here, and if you go back one more time to the diagram, right, looking at the sports supplier table over here, it's in 2 relationships. It's a parent relationship and a one-to-many to inventory. There are many inventory items from the same supplier, but it's the child in a one-to-many, right, from state. So basically, the state has this referential integrity constraint. And a number of students I noticed walking around the room ran into trouble with their insert because the 2-letter code they were using in the sample data they were making up wasn't an existing value in the sports state table. Quick look in there and you'll see it's all US. It's all American states, 2 letters, right? So you can pick one, you know, that works and use it. That's the only thing that kind of caught a few people in terms of coming up with data here, right? So I don't think there is a place called Toronto in Washington, but I don't know. I haven't really looked. There might be. But I just picked WA because I know it's in the existing data, and that shouldn't violate the referential integrity. Yes, question?
Sorry, when I put the where statements, and it shows a incorrect syntax near where. Select supplier, scope and entity, where, row count equals 1.
Oh yeah? Okay.